And we're in the garden this morning. Dabney, you're back with us, and we have a lot of stuff to talk about again today, too.
Yeah, well, first of all, what today's first day of March, and March can be treacherous in tidewater. You're right, that forecast is pretty typical to what I've seen. Marches where things will start to bloom out, and then we'll get the frost and everything. So anyhow, we'll hope for the best with the forecast that you're giving us.
Yeah, we definitely do. But we have a bunch of callers that are coming in this morning. We have Sandra in Virginia Beach. Good morning. What's your question?
I have a hydrangea and a gardenia, and they've never been trimmed, and they're sort of greeting people at the door now. So how do I prune them?
Well, good question, and you're right on schedule. Perfect time. On your hydrangea, keep in mind you cut back as heavily as you want, just so long as you leave a green growth bud. If you look on those dead stems, you'll see buds maybe about a ½ inch long or 3/4 of an inch. Cut back to those, and many stems will have multiple sprouts, so you can cut back fairly far as long as you leave that. And the reason we leave the green bud, that's going to be the new growth for this year that's going to give you blooms. If you cut back past that, you will not kill your plant, but you won't have any blooms. As far as gardenias are concerned, they're evergreen, and definitely, you know, that kind of leads into one of the things I want to talk about this morning, particularly with evergreens. We've got a lot of winter burn because we have had a colder winter than normal. So now is the time of year to start pruning those plants back. And gardenias are one that does show some burn. Maybe yours hasn't, but a lot of them do if they're exposed improperly. So anyhow, now's a good time to cut it. They bloom on new growth, and they bloom during the summer, so you can cut it back as far as you wish without hurting the plant. The more severely you prune your plants, the more important it is to go ahead and fertilize them at the same time to encourage new growth to fill them back out again.
Okay, good. We have June on the Outer Banks. Good morning. What's your question?
Maybe we answered her question as well, too.
Yeah, maybe we did, yeah. Now, Dabney, you brought this houseplant in here. What do you want to talk about that?
Well, that's a Hoya, and the 2 or 3 things. First of all, this is my personal plant. I've had it about 4 years. This is the time of year to repot, so I repotted this week. Number one. Number two, a lot of folks are having problems with houseplants this time of year because with the dry, hot air, they're drying out on top very quickly, and you think, oh my gosh, my plant's dry, let me water. But you'll find that the bottom 2/3 of the pot are still damp because the plants are really not growing that much. Primarily what you're doing is you're getting evaporation moisture. So keep in mind, water plants, a plant that size in that size container needs about 1/3 of a cup of water about every 2 weeks.
Okay, that's not a lot of water
No,
at all.
not at all, maybe a ½ a cup. You can go in maybe every 3 to 5 days and mist the surface if you want to because it looks dry. Humidity is good, and that misting frequently is good, but you're not putting so much water you're damaging the plant.
Okay, here's a question for you. I've done this before too. And now, if I have a house plant similar to this, I've taken the whole plant and put it in the sink and then just have the faucet go on it and soak it until it drains out. Is that a bad idea?
You could do that maybe once every 2 to 3 months. But yes, it's a bad idea to do it on a regular basis because here's, again, ceramic container, plastic containers do not dry out well. And consequently, when you put in the bottom soil never has an opportunity to dry out. And when you go in there every week or 2 weeks and do as you're doing, a lot of times you start damaging your roots. Now, if you have a plant in a clay pot, a little different ballgame because that's porous, you could probably do that every 2 weeks and not hurt the plant.
Okay, all right. We have another caller in from Virginia Beach. Good morning. What's your question?
I think we maybe answered that too. One thing you asked just for one there, you have a plant's doing so well, a variegated philodendron, and you want to get new plants. Well, now you can go ahead and prune this time of year. You can do a couple of different ways. On this particular Hoya, you can't notice it, but I had a long stem on the back side. I placed it up on the soil, took paper clips, and made a U shape to hold it to the soil and let it root from there. And then I'll come in maybe next 6 months or so, cut it away from the mother plant and put that in the pot. Another thing you can do is take cuttings, stick them in water and root them and then put them in soil. That's not my favorite. And thirdly, you can take cuttings, stick them in soil, get the soil damp, put them in soil, and just lightly put a plastic bag so you're setting up a little temporary greenhouse to maintain humidity and let them root in that. And then you can share them with your neighbors and everything.
Okay, we'll try one more caller here, Dabney, this morning. Sean in Virginia Beach, good morning.
Hey, good morning. We have Confederate jasmines that have the leaves are all dead on them now, and I was wondering, do we prune those all the way back, or what do we do with those now?
You can. That's another one of those plants. A lot of tender plants. Confederate jasmine, gosh, I said gardenias, even some of the hawthorn. Yes, now's a good time to go ahead and prune. If you want to wait a couple of weeks, you can. Now, one thing, if you prune Carolina jasmine, the Confederate jasmine you can prune now and you'll still get the blooms during the summer. If you have damage on Carolina jasmine, you may want to let it bloom this spring. Anything that blooms in the spring, let it bloom and then prune it. But the ones that, like Confederate, that do bloom during the summer, yes, go ahead and prune it. And that you may find in some instances in a month or so, your plants do not leaf out. If they don't, then they were actually dead to the ground. We just don't know at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, because we had that harsh winter, so
Right.
that's something we're just
it was
gonna
one
have
of the, yes, yes. A lot of perennials, the same thing. I'm questioning whether they're going to rebound from it. Hopefully, like lantana, which is a borderline plant. It's not actually a perennial, but we treat it as perennial, and over most winters, we cut it back to the ground this time of year, and within a month or two, we have new growth. Whether we're going to have this year or not, be a wait and see because of the colder winter.
Well, the good news is, though, if your plants and shrubs did not make it, Dabney will be back
Right.
in over the next couple of weeks, so we'll be able to talk about what you should put in place of that. So we'll have that.
And one
good
thing,
news.
excuse me for interrupting, one thing, weeds are starting to pop up in the yard, but it's too early to treat for weeds this early. It's too early to treat for crabgrass this early. Crabgrass is a preventer. We do not want to put a preventer out until forsythias start to bloom. As far as the weed control, we do not want to treat for that until the weeds are actively growing. So we're good 30 days probably out from that. So
Okay.
let's just be patient on those things, folks.
All right. Great. Well, thanks a lot for coming
Sure.
in this morning, Dabney. We'll have another check of weather after the break.